Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a great day today, and in this video we're going to be talking about the DCEU and kind of how it failed. So essentially the DCEU started in 2013 and ended in 2023. That's the whole reason that they're starting the new DCU, with kind of James Gunn being recognized as the ringmaster. And I really do think it's unfortunate that the DCEU had to end, because it gave us some really good actors in certain roles, like Henry Cavill as Superman, Ben Affleck as Batman, just to name a couple. Now, people make video essays on this all the time and that sort of thing. People will say there was one moment that caused the DCEU's downfall. They'll say Justice League 2017 was the death of the DCEU, or they'll say it all just went downhill after Dwayne Johnson was cast as Black Adam, or something like that. But in reality, the real reason the DCEU failed wasn't just because of one thing. It was a series of missteps over time that led to its downfall. So let's just go back to the beginning of the DCEU. So basically, there had been a pretty decent number of DC movies before. Obviously, with the Batman quadrilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, the Superman quadrilogy, and a few others, but there really hadn't been a connected universe, and Marvel started one in 2008 with the MCU, and by 2012 they had their Avengers movie. Now, I believe Warner Bros. Actually wanted to start the DCEU with the 2011 Green Lantern movie, but they ended up just not doing that since it wasn't very well received. So Man of Steel actually wound up being the first movie of the DCEU. And I just want to say right off the bat, I think Man of Steel is a phenomenal film, and Superman might be the most iconic DC hero. I mean, so is Batman, but Superman was around like a year longer, so he kind of had a head start. And to be clear, I don't want to make it sound like I think Superman is better than Batman, because that is absolutely not the case. But anyways, Man of Steel comes out in 2013. The problem with this movie is not the movie itself, but more so just the fact that the movie received mixed reviews. There were some people very positive on it, and there were a lot of people that were negative on it. They thought it was too dark for a Superman movie, and that all just started with the misconception that Superman being a symbol of light means that his movies have to be lighthearted. So anyways, that was kind of the first red flag, I guess, for Warner Bros. But really the first big mistake Warner Bros. Made was having a 3-year gap between their first and second movie in the DCEU. Man of Steel came out in 2013, and Batman v Superman came out in 2016. Now, if you compare this to the MCU had 5 movies within their first 3 years. Now, as a whole, Batman v Superman is a movie that I will defend. I actually don't mind the fact that they didn't give us an origin story movie for this version of Batman, simply because we already kind of know his origin story. We've gotten plenty of other Batman movies of Batman being the only main character, and I think that's actually what makes Ben Affleck's version of Batman a great version of Batman, because it's a lived-in universe. There doesn't have to be an explanation for how he has all these gadgets and that kind of stuff, and it feels the most similar to the Batman from the comics or the animated series. Even though this was supposed to be when he was in a very depressed phase, he had almost given up all hope because Robin died, and there was just this very deep backstory, but obviously people just didn't pay attention to that or something. Now, don't get me wrong, I probably would have casted someone other than Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor in this movie, and I'm not completely satisfied with the design of Doomsday, and the film also could have been a little bit longer because there are some plot points that feel a little bit rushed, with them having Wonder Woman in there and setting up the Justice League. But just as a film in general, I think it's good. But just in between that 3-year gap, I think they could have made the Wonder Woman movie instead of waiting until after Batman v Superman, and they probably could have given us an origin story for the Flash as well. Now, by 2017, they did have the Justice League movie come out, and that was 4 years after the DCEU started. And if you compare it to the MCU, the Avengers came out 4 years after that started. So in that sense, they were kind of on track, but in the same way, they hadn't really made origin stories for all these characters. And the 2017 Justice League movie is just kind of terrible because Joss Whedon directed half of it, and there was just so much studio interference, so it's not a good movie. Anyways, after that, Aquaman comes out in 2018. That was actually really successful. It hit over $1 billion, although that is a movie that I feel like feels more like a Marvel movie than a DC movie, maybe just because it leans more into comedy. And I think at this point, a lot of the problems in the DCEU was just studio interference, and it also didn't help that you had all these different directors directing these different projects without there being just one clear vision. I'm not saying Zack Snyder had to direct every DCEU film, but if I was in charge of the DCEU, I probably would have had him direct most of it. And the movies he wouldn't be directing would still be pretty similar in tone. Not necessarily like the exact same vibe for each movie because it's different characters, but they need to feel more like they're in the same universe. We also got Shazam in 2019, which I actually did think was the best way to make a lighthearted movie in this universe, and I like the references to Batman and Superman. Not to mention throughout the DCEU's history, there was 2 Suicide Squad movies, a Birds of Prey movie, and a Peacemaker series, but none of that really ended up connecting as much to the different heroes. Now by 2021, the 4-hour director's cut of Justice League came out, and that was honestly a phenomenal movie. It was so much better than the 2017 version. So if we're being completely honest, this was the first actual good team-up movie in the DCEU, meaning that when you compare it to the MCU, it took twice as long for them to have a good team-up movie. And there was really never a sequel for that. And then in 2022, of course, you had Black Adam coming out, and Dwayne Johnson had a little bit too much control because they ended up having Black Adam as the main character in his own movie rather than a villain in the sequel to Shazam, which just would have been so much better. And that movie was also the last time we saw Henry Cavill as Superman. There was no future Justice League movie with Shazam and all the other heroes set up, which Shazam 2 was fine, and Wonder Woman did appear in it, so like there was a little bit of a connection there. Also in 2023, there was a sequel to Aquaman, a Blue Beetle movie, and The Flash. Now, I actually do think The Flash is a good movie, and I'll defend it. Not the CGI, but just the story in general. I enjoyed seeing Michael Keaton as Batman, and I like the time travel aspect. But it does seem weird that we never got an origin story for The Flash. This really felt more like it should have been the sequel to The Flash. And of course, 2023 was the last year for the DCEU. So it went on for 10 years, which when you compare it to the MCU after 10 years had Avengers Infinity War, where all the characters from the different franchises were in this ginormous team-up movie. So if the MCU had the structure of the DCEU, it essentially would have only been in like phase 2 after 10 years. And it really is a shame because there was a lot of great casting in this universe and some individual movies that I thought were really great, but just as a whole, this universe didn't build up to enough. They just didn't have a great long-term plan. So we'll just have to hope that the new DCU turns out to be pretty good. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.